Today's video covers making a gold cushion. A gold cushion is used for handling gold leaf. I've got some videos coming up in which I'll use gold leaf. Now you can buy gold cushions, though if they're not made locally, the shipping can be quite expensive and they're not difficult to make. So I thought I would cover how to make one. A gold cushion is a piece of timber with some padding on top covered by rough leather. Now rough leather means with the suede or the flesh side out. The leather I used for the first gold cushion I made was kangaroo, and the problem with kangaroo is that it's soft and thin and I cut through the leather. The usual leather that's used is either goat or calf. In this video I'm going to use goat. After deciding on the leather, you then have to decide how large to make it. Now most gold leaf is between 80 and 85 millimeters square, and it comes in a book that's between 90 and 100 millimeters square. Now I want to be able to put a leaf of gold down and the book on the cushion. So I've decided on 12 inches by 5.5 inches. The width was set by a standard size for cheap pine from the hardware store, and the length, well, I could, if I needed, fit 3 sheets of gold on 12 inches. For padding, I'm going to use a layer of felt and then about a half a dozen layers of blotting paper. The number of pieces of paper was just determined by the number of pieces the right size that I could get out of one sheet of blotting paper. The books talk about using different papers from newsprint through to cartridge paper, so the type of paper isn't very important, though I think it should be something soft. I wouldn't use hard modern bond paper. I'll cut the felt to a bit smaller than the size of the board, and the blotting paper I'll cut to a bit smaller than the felt. So there's a sort of gradual build up to the thickness to give a bit of a rounded edge. All of the classic bookbinding books have slightly different instructions for making a gold cushion. For a bit of fun, I'm doing a survey of these and we'll publish that as a blog post. So if you want to see what Lawrence Town recommends in regards to the size and padding for a gold cushion compared to Edith Deal, then keep an eye out for that blog post. I'll cut a piece of leather to extend down the edges of the board, and then I will use carpet tacks to tack it to the board with the padding underneath it. There's nothing special about the way I tack the leather to the board. I start on a long edge and start in the center and then work out from the center. Once I do one long edge, I put the padding under the leather and then do the next long edge, and then I do the ends. I try and keep an even tension on the leather, and I want it tight but not too tight. The gilder's knife I use is made by Rights of Lime, and I'll put a link to their website in the description. It's not particularly expensive, somewhere between 10 and 15 pounds. It's an English style knife which has a clipped end. German style gilder's knives have a rounded end, which looks really handy. I think that would be great for sliding the knife underneath gold, but I haven't tried one of those knives myself. I have seen them used, and that seems to work really well. For a while I used to use an old style butter knife with a faux bone handle, and that worked really well. But then I sharpened that knife up really sharp and use it for other things now. Every single binder seems to have a different method for sharpening their gilder's knife. The Rights of Lime website has the useful advice that the knife should be not too sharp. So I'm not sure what not too sharp is, but if the knife is too sharp, it will cut the gold cushion. The advice on how to sharpen a gilder's knife varies so dramatically, it's hard to know who to listen to. So I suggest that you try a few different ways and then choose the one that works best for you. I've heard things like to use a coarse stone so that you get a slight serration on the edge so that it sort of saws through the gold. I've tried that, and the issue I have with that is that it tends to drag the gold and make a mess of the gold, so I really dislike that method. I've heard to have a slightly rounded edge to the knife, so I guess that means not too sharp. The only problem with that is then if it's not sharp enough, it doesn't cut the gold. What I've settled on is to sharpen with a very steep bevel angle. So when I'm sharpening, the blade is almost 60 degrees from the sharpening stone. So I can sharpen it quite sharp, but it's a really obtuse angle at the tip of the blade or the edge of the blade. And after I sharpen the knife, before I use it on the gold cushion, I have a scrap of leather that's similar to the leather of the gold cushion, and I just test it to make sure that the knife doesn't cut the leather. If you've never worked with gold leaf before, you may be surprised to learn that gold leaf is moved around through the use of small amounts of grease, often bodily grease. Now there's also a wide variety of ways of handling gold leaf. I was originally shown how to use gold leaf at a workshop by Ted Chapman in Sydney. So the techniques that I'm going to demonstrate are based on what I've learned from Ted. That doesn't make this technique the right technique or other techniques wrong techniques. It's just the technique that I use because it's the one that I've learned. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are better techniques, though I probably will continue to stick with my technique because it's what I've learnt and what I've got comfortable with. Now I'm going to put a layer of felt underneath the board just so that the board doesn't scratch up any surfaces I put it on and to stop it sliding around. And then because I decided the carpet tacks are quite ugly on the outside, I'm going to put a piece of red cotton tape around the outside with brass thumbtacks just to make it look a little prettier. So as I mentioned, I'll use grease to help move gold around, and I'll demonstrate that using something called paper tips, and I'll wipe the paper tips on my hair to get a bit of grease off my hair to help the gold stick to the paper tips. Now what you don't want is any grease on the gold cushion because we're trying to get the gold off the cushion, so we definitely don't want any grease on the cushion. So we'll need to clean this cushion before we use it and clean it regularly after it goes into use. The traditional method for getting the grease off your gold cushion was to scrape a bit of bath brick onto the cushion and wipe it back and forth with your gilder's knife and then shake that off the cushion. And the bath brick would absorb any grease and the grease would be transported off with the powder when you shake it off. Now bath brick was a traditional cleaning product. It was made in a town called Bridgewater, which was downstream from large brickworks, and the silt that settled in the river when turned into bricks had a nice abrasive characteristic that could be used for household cleaning. So you would use the back of your gilder's knife to scrape a bit of the powder off a bath brick onto your gilder's cushion, swish it back and forth with the knife and knock it off, and your gilder's cushion would be degreased. Now they haven't made bath bricks in a long time, and so they're not really available. So most people now use ground up pumice, which is what I'm applying now, or talc. Because this is the first time I've cleaned this cushion and it's a new cushion, I've put a lot more pumice on than I normally do. And I normally do this outdoors. I'm going to take it outside to knock it off. This, because it's new, it's also quite nappy, the suede, and using this a large amount of pumice will also take a bit of that nap off and smooth it out a little bit. Until it's been used quite a while, the gold will be not quite as flat as a well-used cushion. It's also really important that your knife is grease-free. There is nothing more frustrating than the gold sticking to your knife. So I give it a regular wipe over with isopropyl alcohol, and then I also habitually wipe it at the ends of the gold cushion in the areas away from where the gold sits. So I'll quickly demonstrate getting some gold out of a book and picking it up with a paper tip, which I'm putting some grease on now. Just a piece of 150 GSM smooth paper. That's drawing paper. Gold leaf comes in books, usually 25 sheets per book, and the gold is interleaved between rouged tissue paper. The size of the gold's between 80 and 85 millimeters. To get it out, I will tap the knife near the edge of the gold, which will blow it back a little bit, and then I'll put the knife under it and very gently blow on the gold, and I'll go over the knife, and then I'll just pick it up over the knife. Now, as long as you move the knife in the direction where the fold is at the front, it'll stay on the knife. Now bring it down and unroll it over the gold cushion, and then gently puff above the gold. So just gently say the letter P. Now I put the knife near the book of gold so that it doesn't blow into the book and wrinkle up the other pieces of gold. I'd normally leave the book of gold on the cushion and put that little tray on top of the book. But just because I'm moving things around for the video, I'll put the book on top of the tray instead. That tray, I've made a number of those, and when I'm not using the gold, I'll put a tray over the gold on the cushion. To cut the gold, I'll apply a little bit of pressure and do a little bit of a sawing motion, and then drag the knife off the gold before lifting it up. I think you're much less likely to lift the gold up with the knife with that technique. What I'm doing here is loading up some paper tips to do a gilt edge. So when I put the paper down on the gold, I want about 1/2 millimeter to stick over the edge of the paper so I know where the gold is, so that I can position it correctly on the edge of the book. So I'll roll the paper down and then very, very gently run my finger over the back to make sure that the gold is attached to the paper. This last piece of gold is wider than I need, so I'm going to cut a few millimeters off of it, and that narrow strip will be really useful if I have to do any patching on the edge. If there's any cracks in the edge, I'll be able to pick that up with a bit of cotton wool and apply them to the cracks. If I end up not using it, I will try and get that gold back into a book, though that's a fairly small piece of gold and it's going to be hard to move. But I've got an empty book that I keep all the odd pieces in, which I can then use for patching if there's any flaws, which there always is, in either any gilding or edge work that I'm doing. I think working with gold leaf has developed a reputation for being a difficult and advanced topic or technique, and I don't think that's really the case. I think everyone's capable of working with it. I hope this starts to take the mystery out of gold leaf for you, and when I do a gold edge that you think about giving it a go. As usual, I really appreciate you hitting the big thumbs up button, and if you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button. And until next time, cheerio.